Hi everyone and welcome to Murder UK with me, Vanessa. Today we are at Tunstall Cemetery and we're visiting the grave of a 7-year-old little boy who was failed by the system. This is the story of Kirk Baker. Little Kirk Hammersley Baker was born on the 10th of July 1991 to Mum Michelle Prince and Dad Carl Hammersley Baker. He entered into this world no bigger than a bag of sugar. Mum Michelle chose to leave little Kirk with his father Carl to pursue a relationship with a man who had previous convictions of child abuse. Little Kirk's unstable home life was evident, as his neglectful father would often leave him alone to fend for himself. Little Kirk never stood a chance, but he loved going to St. Thomas's Roman Catholic School, and his attendance at the school served as a safe haven. He was a loving boy who had a big smile and loved hugs. At the age of 2.5, little Kirk went to live with his grandmother, Mavis Prince, in Golden Hill, Stoke-on-Trent. It was possibly the happiest 18 months of his life, but not long after he turned 4, he would be placed back with his father, who had seemingly formed a stable relationship with a new woman. But when it had ended, little Kirk's dad, Carl Hammersley Baker, started to date men and would be described as a promiscuous homosexual, earning himself the nickname Queenie for his incredibly camp gestures. Male lovers were frequent visitors to the house in Fletcher Road, Stoke-on-Trent, so little Kirk would have to keep himself entertained alone. Little Kirk was described as a little boy lost. He suffered physical abuse by his mother's boyfriend and emotional abuse from his father. He was deemed by social services as being in a vulnerable position, regardless of which parent he stayed with. Carl was the worst role model for little Kirk, and on a number of occasions he'd failed to pick him up from school. He once left him at his grandmother's home on Christmas Eve and didn't return until 3 weeks later. It was against this backdrop that alarm bells started to ring when little Kirk failed to turn up for school on Friday the 19th of March 1999. Carl rang the school and began to tell the staff that he would not be returning that day or any time in the near future. He used the excuse that little Kirk had gone to live with relatives in the south of England. School staff were immediately suspicious. They knew little Kirk would have told everyone about his big move, and they also knew he was on the social services at-risk register because of the previous treatment he had received at the hands of his own father. The school contacted the police, who tracked little Kirk's father to his place of work at Stadium Court Nursing Home in Cobridge, Stoke-on-Trent, where he worked as a care assistant, and began to question him. He insisted little Kirk had gone to stay with his great-uncle in Devon, but when the police eventually spoke with the uncle, he informed the police that he hadn't seen little Kirk or Carl for a number of years. When confronted with the lie, Carl began to reel off a variety of stories explaining little Kirk's disappearance, including one which claimed he'd been kidnapped by 2 unknown men. But despite being questioned by the police about little Kirk's whereabouts, he continued to live life to the full, even heading to a club later that evening where he picked up a man before heading back to his house in Fletcher Road, Stoke-on-Trent. Carl had initially tried to fix up a threesome but was turned down, so he had sex with a second male that night on little Kirk's bed. On Sunday the 21st of March 1999, with suspicions mounting, Carl was arrested and questioned by detectives. The following day, on Monday, March the 22nd, police searched the property on Fletcher Road and made a grim discovery. Little Kirk's lifeless body was found in the most harrowing of circumstances. Inside one of the pitch-black outbuildings, surrounded by half-empty paint tins, little Kirk's body was found. He was wrapped in a duvet and squashed into a bright red shopping trolley. He had been drugged and strangled. It later transpired that little Kirk suffered from epilepsy and had been drugged by his father with the antidepressant Prozac before being strangled. Carl had been prescribed the drug for his own personal use. A warning label was issued on the medication bottle that the drug should never be administered to children, let alone a child with little Kirk's medical condition, as it would encourage severe fits. It's believed that little Kirk had died sometime the previous Friday morning, minutes before he was due to leave for school. He was killed in his own bed before being dumped in a dark, dingy outbuilding. Carl then carried on as though nothing had happened. He went to work and even helped friends out with gardening chores. Little Kirk was murdered due to the fact that Carl had received a letter from social services stating that little Kirk's mother, Michelle, would be allowed a residential order to care for him. Police who came into contact with Carl described him as being one of the most evil men they had ever encountered. He barely showed a flicker of emotion for ending his own son's life. Detective Superintendent Jeff Virgo, who was the lead murder investigating officer, said, "This was never an unintended killing," and added, "He is a callous, wicked, and very selfish man who took his own son's life. It's amazing that someone who worked as a care worker could show little care for his own son. He decided selfishly that if he couldn't have his son, then nobody else could." Carl admitted killing his son, but claimed he lacked the necessary intent to be guilty of the murder. His defence was rejected by a jury at Stafford Crown Court, and on the 10th of February 2000, Carl Hammersley Baker was convicted following a trial and sentenced to life by Mr. Justice Maurice Kay. A year after being sentenced, Carl Hammersley Baker lodged an appeal against his conviction, stating that the press sensationalised the reporting of his trial and focused more on his homosexual lifestyle, which in turn resulted in having a prejudiced jury. This was thrown out by London's Court of Appeal. At Little Kirk's funeral, the school chairman of governors recalled how little Kirk would come running out of the doorway beaming and ready to give you a big hug, and that he had shown incredible capacity for loving. St. Thomas's Roman Catholic Primary School opened a new play area in Little Kirk's memory, which was revamped in 2019 in honour for the 20th anniversary of his death. So that was the sad story of little Kirk, and we've arrived at the graveside. So you will notice that I'm not holding a flower, I'm holding a bus. Now the little man loved his buses, so we're going to leave him with a toy bus today. And if we just take a look at the headstone, it reads, Kirk Hammersley Baker, born July the 10th, 1991, died March the 22nd, 1999. A beloved grandson and a special friend to many. And just at the bottom of the plinth here it reads, safe in the arms of Jesus. God bless you, little Kirk. So if you found today's story interesting and you'd like to hear more murder stories with me, Vanessa, stay tuned. Until next time, take care, stay safe. Bye for now.